Hey,
All right.
Graham.
Hey, Alicia.
Welcome to
Right
Fucking
now.
Now. Woo! Hey, so thanks so much for joining me today. For people who are watching and listening along, this is my dear friend Graham. Graham and I used to hang out in my kitchen almost every morning while making coffee for about 3 or 4 months. And we would just have these lovely morning chats. And so Graham was hanging out with me and his wife over the winter here in Phoenix. And so we thought we would recreate the kitchen experience today on our episode. So, Graham, where are you currently? What's going on with you?
I am sitting in my truck in a parking lot because this is a part of my life. We've been traveling on the road for over 3 years. And so right now we are in Norfolk, Virginia. And later today we'll be in Delaware. And then the next day we'll be in New Jersey. So it's a life.
Amazing. I love how we even have in the shot the camper in the background too.
Yes. Yeah. You always got to have the camper.
Yeah, that
That's
was
our
planned.
symbol of travel.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
so a little background on Graham. Graham is another longtime Abraham Hicks listener. Graham and I met a little over a year ago on the Caribbean cruise with Abraham Hicks. So that was the
Right.
spring 24. So, and Graham's just been a good buddy to like riff on different ideas and concepts we've been playing with or things we're listening to or reading or whatever. So that said, Graham, what's on your mind now? What do you got cooking up?
Well, I was thinking recently about reactions, and then I started thinking about emotions and really appreciating how, through my metaphysical and spiritual and mindfulness studies, I've really come to, I believe, understand what emotions are. And I'm not sure that it's a common understanding. I would like to continue to share these thoughts. So this is a great opportunity for me to get more comfortable with that, so that then I can have more conversations with people who might not have the same vocabulary and see if maybe I can share some of these ideas and help myself and others to get a little bit clearer about what emotions are. And so I'll tie it together with something that I just started thinking about, and I'm going to call it the reaction sequence.
Okay.
And so maybe you and I even can develop it a little further in this conversation, where I'm imagining that a lot of people think that something happens, whether it's within their own body or whether it's within the world around them or somewhere else on the planet or wherever. And then the emotion seems to follow from the thing that happened. The sensation in the body or the world event or whatever, as if there's not another part that's going on in there. And I think that anyone who's spent some time with Abraham or any of the other channelers or really any spiritual teacher throughout time, if they're really digging into the teachings and the wisdom, then there's a sense that there is more going on than just the emotion happening from the observation. And maybe the observation is kind of even left out. So that's what I'm wanting to fill in as far as the sequence goes. So let's start with the idea that we have beliefs. And so that really is the beginning. And that could also be described, I've been thinking a lot about associations. So I think for the purpose of this idea, those are interchangeable. So, I have a set of beliefs.
Can I just interrupt really quick? I love
Please.
that distinction of beliefs and associations, even though they're technically the same thing. I think sometimes, at least for myself, when I hear the word belief, it feels like this bigger, like kind of like this is my belief. But I love how that idea of an association, it's like a lighter thing, but it's still that fundamental base of like, okay, this is what we're working from, right? We have this belief
Exactly.
or association, which is kind of the same. So I love that addition of association. So anyway, continue.
Well, I think one of the greatest things we can do as teachers or influencers, maybe would be an interesting word to use, is to find new, fresh vocabulary, right? Because things can get bogged down or reoriented or heavy. And so any way that we can start to use some different words to lighten it up or go in a different direction, I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I'm feeling like association is really the best word to describe the sequence. So, right. So that's the foundation, right? So I have my set of associations, you do, everyone does. And then there is the manifestation, right? So that could be just like I was describing earlier. It could be, oh, I've got an ache in my body, or I have a thought in my mind, or there's something happens in front of me, or something happens on the other side of the world and I hear about it. All of those are manifestations. So that would be the number 2 in this sequence here after association. And then there is a reaction. And that is, I think, always a thought, though I would leave room for a reaction to be something so basic, like when we say a knee-jerk reaction. I would give some space for the idea that there's not really a thought in the way that we might say that. I just feel like there needs to be a little bit of leeway there, because I consider myself to be a long time intellectual, I suppose you could say, and yet I can't always figure out what the thought actually is. So in this case, we're going to call that a reaction, and that's going to cover a thought that we could put into words, as well as something that maybe happens really fast or is just really basic in our brain that we wouldn't necessarily be able to put exact words to it. So that's going to be number 3, is the reaction. And then the emotion I would put as number 4 in the sequence, because my understanding, and a lot of this is based on Abraham's teachings, is that reaction has some kind of quality in me. It relates to, and this is where I think maybe I could go off on a tangent. I want to keep it a little tighter. So let's leave it there with those four elements there. And I think the part to dig into is the emotional part, but I'm feeling like we might want to pause for a second here, and maybe if there's anything you want to add to that, or any questions that you might have that would kind of direct us towards the emotional piece.
One of the things that's coming to mind, and you used this word earlier, which was the idea of observation of the manifestation. So I don't know if that's kind of like step 2.5 after the manifestation or event. There's observation, there's reaction, and those two can be milliseconds apart, right? But I wonder if there's something there with your calling out of observation, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, well, I think that's really well said. And I even thought, as I was coming, into this idea of a sequence, that it was likely to keep unpacking into more steps, because there really are almost like infinite divisions that could happen. And so I'm very happy to add observation in there between manifestation and reaction, because that is happening, right? There has to be some kind of awareness of whatever the manifestation is, and then there's a reaction based on that awareness. And there's probably, even if we really wanted to nerd out, we probably could even start to realize that it's kind of really concurrent. That's one of my favorite fancy words, because it's not exactly a sequence. Our minds like to break things into a sequence so that we can think about them in a way. But my sense is that a lot of this is kind of all happening within one moment, we could say.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense. Cool. Okay, so I'm with you, and I follow this exactly. So that foundational idea of associations, or if we want to call it beliefs, then
Right.
that the event or the manifestation occurs.
Hmm.
There's the observation of it, and then a reaction, which could be that thought, it could be that body movement, that whatever, that idea of reaction. And it felt like, was there a little something more you wanted to add to that reaction step?
Well, I think that what I'm realizing is that the emotion is almost the container that all of this is happening within, because I feel like the association then comes back around, or rather the reaction comes back around to the association.
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately, when Abraham is talking about having 2 points of perspective, where we have our current human perspective, and that's what we're talking about in terms of associations. And then in order for an emotion to happen, there has to be some kind of relationship. So what's that other piece that it's in relationship to?
Yeah.
And so I think, we can talk about inner being, or sometimes I like to call it inner truth, or broader perspective.
Yep.
And I think all of those terms are really pointing to the same thing. It's some kind of relationship with whatever it is that we're focused on currently, which we're calling a reaction, which is based on an association. So I'm not thinking of it as tangled exactly, but each thing does point back to each other thing. So maybe I think the best way to describe this is back to the beginning. Like, what is an emotion? Well, an emotion is this process, or is this interconnectedness of these different concepts, and that's how we can better understand, why am I having the emotion that I'm having?
Yeah.
Where am I coming from? What's happening now? And then we get to the empowerment piece, where it's like, well, is this the emotion that I want to be having? Is this the association that I prefer? Am I catching the reaction when it's happening? So I think that's all of the why would we even want to think and talk about this.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. And thinking about that idea of relationship, right? Like, okay, so then now I'm experiencing emotion, right? And this is where we get specifically into the idea of the emotional guidance system, right? And I know that Abraham presents it as kind of a scale and a list of emotions, but I like that idea of thinking about it as almost like 2 points, right? In that relationship between the 2 points. So inner being, truth, inner truth, whatever, in relationship to where I am right now, right?
Yeah.
And then that association is kind of the line, the distance in between that, right? Is the causation of that distance or whatever. So yeah, that's really cool. So how has this been coming up for you, or how have you been playing with this in your interactions with people?
Well, you went right to it. It really is so much for me about interpersonal, because sometimes I joke that I'm a recovering introvert, or that I discovered that I'm actually not an introvert. And I think that I would question at this point in my life if anyone is truly an introvert, in the sense that my discovery was that I was using that label almost as an excuse to not develop myself further socially, or to find ways to be who I really am around other people. And so I have some skepticism around that. But I also want to say that I do believe that there are people who are oriented toward recharging in a quiet, contemplative way. And I do think that that is true for me. And I also am aware that there are people, perhaps you actually, who recharge among other people, or at least you can do that. It may not be what you always do. And I'm not sure that that's something that I really have access to. Maybe I will later in my life. So for me, my association with being around other people is that it's going to be challenging, or I'm going to have to be more assertive than I would maybe prefer, or than it's comfortable or familiar for me, or that I might have to be defensive in some way. So not the most positive association. And so what's been happening to me is kind of two different things, is that I have found that in some interactions, especially with family or older friends, meaning friends that I've had for a while, that might be true. Like I might find myself, at least in that interaction, that I do have to tighten up a little bit and really pay attention to what's going on with me. Am I being authentic? Do I need to step away? That kind of stuff. But then on the other side of it, what I'm also finding, and sometimes with the same category of person, a family member or someone that I've known for a long time, I'm actually noticed that I'm having a different interaction with them than I have in the past. And so that gives me a really great opportunity to notice, whoa, I'm kind of dragging an old association into this interaction. My awareness is greater than it's ever been, and it kind of sticks out more too.
Oh, that's so cool.
So I'm noticing, okay, I know what my association is because it's been decades possibly. So I'm already aware of that. I see myself dragging it into the interaction. I'm actually not seeing the same manifestation that I normally would. It actually is different than it has been in the past. I feel different. Someone else may even be behaving differently. I might give myself a little credit for that, for bringing some fresh energy. I might give someone else some credit for, whatever development they've done. And so then that reaction that happens is really something I can work with because it's stale. It's obvious. It's something that really is asking to be modified.
Yeah. It almost seems like that reaction is kind of out of habit, right?
Totally.
Like this is the habit I have with this person. And until we become conscious to it, that habit will just keep happening. So, wow, what a cool, fun realization.
Yeah, I feel like I'm getting a lot out of it, and it's really supportive to my own development, which I'm focusing on more and more, and understanding why that's the best choice rather than looking for compromises and realizing that sacrifice doesn't really have a place in my life. And I can't speak for other people, but I don't know any examples where I think this classic idea of sacrifice really makes any sense.
Yeah.
And so that in itself is challenging for me sometimes because there are people that I'm used to doing that with, compromising to the point of sacrifice. And it is almost impossible at this point because I'm too aware, I'm too sensitive, and it will quickly manifest into so much discomfort for me. So my guidance system is working.
That's awesome.
And it's an opportunity every time to make a different choice and use the awareness to, transform whatever it is that I feel like I have access to. And that's a process unto itself, right?
Yeah.
To realize, what can I do in this situation, or what can I do the next time? Because so much of what we're talking about is repetitive. People who we know we're going to see, people who maybe are headed in like right now, I'm going through a phase of life where my parents are having some challenges and they're becoming a little bit more dependent, or they're suggesting that they, could be more dependent on me. And I definitely was not prepared to navigate that sort of thing. So that's been an example of a challenge for me, where association, parents aren't supposed to be dependent on their children, even though I've heard of many examples of that happening. When it started happening to me, when I started feeling that way, I had to come up with a whole new skill set in order to make decisions based on that. How am I going to handle this situation? What do I think I'm going to do in the future based on the direction that I think it's going? So it gets complex quickly. And at my best, I'm thinking of it as an opportunity.
Yeah, an opportunity to revisit some of those old reactions, old habits, old patterns. That's really cool. You said something a minute ago that I want to go back to, which was, I think, is this a nuanced thing, the difference between compromise and sacrifice. And
Sure.
I'm curious, how do you navigate that?
Gosh, I mean, as I think you're suggesting, it could be one of those truly case by case situations, because as soon as we put a label on it, we get a slightly different variation of it, and we have to decide again.
Yeah.
And I would mention that previously you and I were talking about maturity as something I had been thinking about. And I really think that that is one of the, if I were to make a top 5 list, which I'm not prepared in this moment to do, of what maturity is, that would be on there, is the willingness to make decisions as they come and not try to rely on a lot of categorical pre-decisions.
Yeah.
And so I think this is a great example of that, where in one instance, a compromise might be reasonable, might even be necessary, or as close to necessary as, anything could be. Whereas a very, very similar compromise in a different situation or with a different person would definitely be in the sacrifice category. And so I think I can clarify that by saying sacrifice means that, well, I was going to say that it means that I lose and someone else wins. But I think at this point, I would highly question that, because if I'm losing, and I'm not talking about a competition, or something structured like a game, I'm talking about a life situation where if I'm genuinely losing, if I'm depleting myself in some way, then how could I possibly be helping someone? How could someone actually benefit from that? And so that's one definition of where sacrifice goes beyond compromise. Whereas compromise could be something like, this is not my first choice, but it's within my set of choices that will continue to move me forward. Maybe not as fast as I thought or think I would prefer, but I'm gonna help someone, or someone's gonna be able to come along with me if I make this choice, versus I'm probably gonna leave them behind if I make this other choice. And that's not ultimately what I want. I want the together of it. Do you have a different thought about compromise or sacrifice?
No. And I was gonna say, I love what you said at the beginning, in that it is such a nuanced thing that it's not beneficial to put a hard definition around it one way or another. And it feels energetic. It feels like an energetic thing that needs to be assessed moment to moment.
It's true.
Yeah, and even as our associations and beliefs are shifting moment to moment, right, then the ability to compromise versus slipping into sacrifice shifts moment to moment as well. So, yeah, that's so cool. It sounds like you've done like a lot of processing and thinking on this. And I have to go back to even earlier when you identified yourself as a recovering introvert. That's a big deal. And I love that language too. So what do you think spurred that awareness, or how did you come about to that?
It was actually the cruise where I met you and a bunch of other lovely people that are now significant parts of my life and our life. And I think that to be in that environment where there was so many like-minded people, and we were we were together in that particular way on a cruise ship. That was my first cruise as well. And so it was so novel on so many levels that I really found myself talking more, sharing more. And that's not something that necessarily is difficult for me, but something that I had sort of let slip away a little bit. Maybe doing that defensive thing where, well, I'm not going to be understood fully, and so I'm not going to share. That sort of thing. And so it was really a good wake up for me in realizing that if I'm willing to do the spiritual, mental, and physical work, seems like the wrong word, but I think you'll understand what I mean, then I can have more of all of that. I can have more of the like-mindedness and more of the togetherness and all of that. And then what I find is that I'm the last one to finish my dinner because I wanna interact. And that was something that I definitely experienced there. And that's actually where I came up with that concept, as well as that joke, poking fun at myself, and maybe at the idea of introversion, which I think could be a overused term, let's say.
That's so cool. Well, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground, like good stuff here too. So lots of good things to think about. And I definitely want to have you back at some point to talk about maturity and how that's evolving in terms of your thought processes. So
yeah, it seems like that would be a logical other topic. And I love that you chose to do this in your kitchen where many a morning conversation was had.
We've processed a lot of stuff in this kitchen. So.
You got it. It's got good energy.
It does. Cool. Well, hey, Graham, thanks again for joining me today. I'm so delighted that you're able to find time in your travels to have the conversation and share what you're thinking about. And I know I always benefit from our conversations. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Likewise, I find you to be one of the best listeners and encouragers, and your questions are always on point.
Oh, thanks.
So well done to you as well.
Great. Well, until next time, have a good day.
You too.
Okay,
bye, Alicia.
Okay, cut.